This is what you gotta know as a man. Single chicks with kids are spiders with webs, and they're trying to draw you in. They are desperate at this point. They need a man to work while they take care of their kids. They need someone. They want someone. They're spinning their web. They're trying to attract men into it. In the web, it might look good because it looks like how attractive she is. It smells like the perfume she wears. It feels like how charming she is when she smiles at you. I'm going to be your lover, Joel. I'm going to be here forever. I'm going to have sweet, sweet love. We're going to make sweet love with each other. And then she traps you and you get stuck in the web. And she wraps you up in that web and sucks your blood forever. All your time, all your future, all your opportunities, all your chances to make something of yourself. Gone. Gone. And same thing with a chick that's trying to get pregnant.
That was very dramatic and cynical at the same time. I'm kind of...
It's true.
I'm
Don't
impressed,
deny
sir.
it. These are the facts.
I'm legitimately impressed right now.
I'm just laying down the facts how they are.
Just oozing out so much.
I mean, look, you got to realize these things so you don't fall into these traps. You got to recognize the patterns that humans have.
Before we talk about these sort of webs and commitment, okay, let's remember who in this conversation was engaged. I'm well aware of what you're talking about.
Well, maybe you're the one who needs a refresher because you're the one who got engaged. You're the one who fell into the trap. I stayed away like a smart person.
Yeah,
I thought,
I'm not
hey.
currently married, so...
Well, I'm glad you got out of it at the last second, just like screeching your tires to a halt before a red light that you didn't see on time.
Well, I mean, for this relationship, that was exactly the point. But that was coming up on 7 years ago now, so...
It is a while ago. And even at the time, I was thinking, what is he thinking right now? He's only, we just had gotten out of high school.
I was madly in love, don't you know?
I mean, it must have just been a love at first sight thing. I don't really know.
Not at all. I actually don't believe in love at first sight at all. And I certainly don't believe in the concept of soulmates.
Hold on. You don't believe in love at first sight?
No.
I mean, I believe in love at first sight because I think chicks look at me and they're just like, I'm in love with that man.
Well, first off, you're being sarcastic. Second off, that's a ridiculous notion.
When chicks look at this face, they're like, how do I get with that man? And it's not about me. It's not about me being attractive. It's not about how charming and how charismatic I am. It's just how I can make people feel like they're part of something bigger when they're around me. It's about them.
What exactly is this bigger thing that they're part of?
It's me, bruh.
Your life?
Me, bruh. It's the man. It's the man with a plan. It's the guy who's going somewhere.
Where are you going?
Going uphill.
Where are you going?
Like Sisyphus pushing the rock up
Where are you
the
going?
mountain. On a journey forever.
Where are you going?
Success, fame, money. And look,
How are you going to get there?
I don't even need any of those things.
Where's your ticket?
I don't even need any of those things. Because I'm just so awesome that the Lane experience is just enrapturing.
You know who you sound like?
I sound like myself, bruh.
You sound like Jim. Look at me. I'm Jim Acosta from CNN.
I do not know who that is because I do not watch CNN.
Jim Acosta loves him some Jim Acosta.
Acosta? Isn't that old sports announcer dude?
No. Or maybe there is an old sports announcer named Acosta, but...
Who would comment on baseball and things like that?
This guy's a windbag.
Well, there's a lot of windbags out there, but sir, I am no windbag. I am...
But Lane LeClaire does love him some Lane LeClaire.
I mean, a lot of people love themselves some Lane LeClaire. That's just how it is. I can't stop it. I can't do anything about it. There's just this certain magnetism that some people are born with, and some people aren't. And I'm looking at you over there on the aren't.
I cannot wait to be an officer.
How soon is that going to be?
Not soon enough, but hopefully in the next year.
How's that going to make you feel to be an officer?
Pretty freaking great.
So when you become an officer, how is that described in your clothing? Like, what's the patch you get? What's the little medal? I don't know. I don't really know the details of military uniform.
Well, if I do
Not
switch,
that this is the important part, but
if I do, no, it's an interesting part.
hey,
So if
chicks love a man in uniform. It's going to up your game a little bit.
Well, I've already been in uniform for the past 4 years, but it's actually been kind of interesting. This is a side note, and then I'll get back to the uniform question. There are times where it's like I'll meet a girl and we'll talk, and I'll say, hey, I'm currently stationed in Nebraska. I found a lot of people that support the military in theory, but not in practice. They don't want to move. They don't want to do a lot of the things that are associated with long-term being in a military relationship. They're okay with supporting the military in theory. They don't want to be tied down with the long-term ramifications of dating someone.
I mean, that's somewhat understandable. Just how I was saying how you don't want to be caught in a web of having children that aren't yours.
Maybe that's
in
why.
In the same way, things that take your time could also be being in a relationship that someone's in the military.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a decent bit of commitment, and there's a certain amount of sacrifice that goes along with it. Exactly. And so maybe that's why I don't worry about the spider web. Maybe I am the spider. Maybe I'm the one that's weaving the web.
Oh, ooh. You better be careful in this Me Too age of being a spider predator out there.
Well, that's probably why I'm pretty picky. Got a 3-date rule. I don't take you seriously until after 3 dates.
The last 2 dates I went on, I didn't feel like going on another date with them. Because the one of them, she was all right. She was smart. She was interesting, kinda. But we just didn't have that vibe. We didn't vibe together, which is hard to do because my vibe's pretty awesome usually. But
here we go with the self-love again.
But we just didn't click, We had interesting conversation, and I felt nothing. And I thought, hey, I want to feel something when I'm out with someone. I want there to be a connection, some romance.
Sparks to fly.
Flying sparks, electricity, nuclear reaction. And then the last one I went on,
well,
she was just
worried
boring.
About fallout?
The last date I went on, she was just boring. And I don't deal with boring chicks. She has nothing to say. She had no thoughts of her own. I talked her ear off, asked her opinions on many things.
You asked her?
I asked her opinion on many things. And
you
she had
no
opinion. No opinion.
Asked her.
And I was like, how can I be with someone who has no opinion on anything ever? How do you exist? The old saying, I think, therefore I am.
Right.
Well, she didn't think. So is she even a thing? Is she even am? Is she even,
Right.
What separates humans from animals? Our ability to think, pontificate,
You know what's funny?
Write poetry, write music, create great literature, create cities and towns and feats of physical activity or anything we want to do. And some people just do none of those things. And so how are they any different from a chimpanzee? Other than the screeching, they're exactly like an animal. And I will have none of it.
You know what's funny? I know sometimes we'll down talk. I don't know if that's even a term. Feminism.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing.
We critique feminism.
Well, fair enough. I have no issues with intelligent, opinionated, women that have strong personalities and have things to back it up. In fact, I kind of want that. Kind of what you were saying, Come in, have a little bit of substance to yourself, have some opinions. We can discuss things. If you challenge me a couple of times,
ooh,
look.
I love a chick that challenges.
I don't mean it in the way you just meant it, because
I think we mean the same thing.
Well, our objectives
An intellectual back and forth.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly.
Chess.
Please have your own opinions. Be your own person. Be a strong and independent woman. And what I mean by that is...
I think I can interpret what you're saying. Bring something to the table other than just sex. Too many times, women rely on sex to be the number one thing that entraps... I mean, I say entraps just because I have that kind of viewpoint about women, apparently. But they use that as their only bartering tool to get any man they want. And the hotter they are, the more bartering currency they have. Now, I don't agree with that. I think a woman needs to, at least with me, a woman needs to bring something more to the table than just sex. I want to be able to have an interesting conversation with you. I want to be inspired when you talk about the things that inspire you. Does anything inspire you? Do you have anything to say other than what your friends just did, what Kim Kardashian just did on her show, or what kind of clothes I want to buy? Do you have anything interesting other than the completely mundane to lure me in with? You know? What makes you special other than your hotness? I see past the hotness. I see into the heart. I see on the inside. And a lot of times they just come up empty. You know?
Well, why do I want to see you again?
Like a vending machine you're hoping to get something out of and it just doesn't happen.
And you shake it and you shake it.
And you shake her and you shake her. Wait.
What?
Say something interesting. I'm begging you. I'm so bored.
We
intellectually stimulate me.
We do not condone violence.
We do not. We do not whatsoever.
Assaults.
But you know what I mean.
But still, it's just like people these days, their brains are sometimes just empty.
It's true.
And it's disappointing.
You know, I was joking around with this guy at the bar that for a man to be able to donate at a sperm bank, you should be able to pass a test, like a Mensa test or something like that.
Oh, goodness. This conversation?
And he informed me that that's actually a real thing. There's some sperm banks where you do have to have a certain level of intelligence. And I thought, damn it, there goes my business plan. That was my idea. But apparently
again.
But great minds think alike. And obviously there was another great mind out there that thought the same thing and, you know, built it. So I'm glad for him. I'm glad he made a high status sperm bank for only great sperm. Maybe someday I'll donate my sperm there. No promises. They'll have to pay me a little extra, but I might. But you know what I'm saying?
So Lane,
some people shouldn't breed. Hot take.
What do you think about Notre Dame burning?
What do I think about Notre Dame burning?
Well, notice how I said hot take, and then I asked about a place burning.
Very clever.
Ha ha.
I'm just tickled with your humor right now.
Some might think I'm insensitive, but I only say that because no one was actually hurt in the fire.
But no, I read a little bit about it, and I was made aware that there's a lot of, you know, billionaire type characters that are donating money to the cause and trying to fix it back up. So I'm glad that there was such a quick response for people trying to redo the things that were burnt and fix it back up a little bit. Apparently there's already been,
you know, several $100 million donated.
Right, and that's great. And that just shows what happens when, you know, a disaster happens and people actually come together.
Come together right now?
Because that always seems to be the case, is when is the time that people are most unified? When something has happened to them and now they have a common goal to gather around. I'm not saying there has to be tragedy for this to happen, but it seems like that's just the way it is.
Well, you mentioned shared trauma.
Shared trauma. I did mention that the other day. Shared trauma is the ultimate bond. Whether you're talking about interpersonally or amongst large groups of people, it tends to stay the truth.
Well, not even just shared trauma, but I think sometimes, especially as we look at how many distractions and how many things there are that cry for our attention these days, if you have one event that is so overwhelmingly attention grabbing, then it can help a lot of people to focus just on that long enough to realize, hey, I should do something, and other people feel the same way, and then other people will join on because other people are doing it. And it's just one of those things where it's like, this is the thing that grabs our attention. So I'm going to take a moment because for whatever reason, this is important to me, and I'm going to act on it.
Yeah. It's interesting the things that people actually notice as, hey, this is a cause that I could help. And something else that might be, just as wanting and goes completely unnoticed. But I think in the age that we live in, we're going more and more towards having the world be an improved place overall. From 2000 to 2012, the rate of absolute abject poverty was sliced in half.
Right.
The largest economic boom in human history. So things are improving, not just here in America, but all over the world. And the more that other countries adopt Western economic policies, the more they thrive. And I think that's a great thing that's happening. So
I agree.
We have things to be happy about, things to be positive about.
I'm all for everybody doing better. Here's the thing. Some people complain about other people and the amount of money they have. Look, if an economy overall is doing better and the millionaires become billionaires, you know what? I don't care. I just don't care. That's envy. I just want some myself.
Right.
What is it? The rising tide raises all ships?
Well, that just sounds like trickle-down economics, and that's just... the guy who invented trickle-down economics while he was working for the government, as soon as he got out of his job, he said, yeah, that was complete bullshit, and we shouldn't pay any attention to it.
I think that there's plenty of
it depends on what
proof
you mean.
in
Where
the
is
world
it actually
about how... Because here's the thing. You talked about needing a high level of intelligence for sperm, which I thought was kind of funny because Justin and I had a follow-up to the follow-up conversation about peasants the other day. And it's kind of funny because he finally realized...
You're still hung up on this calling Americans peasants thing.
Look, I'm not a freaking peasant, okay?
No, I agree.
But
we don't have a caste system.
right, that he finally recognized that. He's like, "Oh yeah, I guess royalty and peasants don't really exist anymore."
No, they don't.
But back to my point, there are some, not all of them, but there are some people that I would rather them have the money than other people because they can do more with it and benefit more people, right?
Exactly.
But
at the same time,
your boy Elon Musk.
At the same time, we shouldn't
Jeff Bezos.
force them to.
No. Of course
Like this
not.
whole
Of course
52% tax thing that Bernie Sanders was proposing. And I was just watching this
The
episode of
52%? Yeah.
of The Tonight Show or whatever. What's the show that Stephen Colbert's on? And so I saw an
it's The
episode,
Daily Show.
The Daily Show.
I think. I'm not sure. Don't
There
quote
was
me.
this episode where Stephen Colbert, it was Stephen Colbert's show.
He's kind of a clown.
And Bill Gates went on, and he starts advocating for taxing rich people, people over a certain amount of billions of dollars, an extremely ridiculously high amount. And I just think, we shouldn't demand these things out of people just because they're rich. Yeah, they're rich, and maybe there's a school of thought that when you have a certain amount of money, that money is resources. And that's resources that could provide things for a lot of people. So that's the school of thought. But at the same time, we shouldn't force people to do anything with their money because it's their money. Whether they earned it all themselves, inherited it, no matter how they got their money, it's still their money. And we shouldn't demand some ridiculously high tax amount out of rich people.
But wouldn't you say that Bill Gates, during his time from the 80s till now with the creation of Microsoft and all of that, that was definitely a rising ship that because of capitalism was able to rise, and it's helped millions of people in the U.S. and across the world.
Right, because
and that's what I was trying to say, is that, like,
Yes.
you see people like that they are sparking innovation, and there's such a meritocratic system that promotes that sort of gains incentive type structure. And that has only resulted in, I would say, net benefit to the world.
Except for when they outsource things to sweatshops in other countries where they can get things really cheaply. So I guess it would depend on the company. But yeah, a large company like Microsoft,
Well,
when you
I
have
think-
something like that, you are providing jobs for a lot of people, not to mention a product that's pretty amazing. And so when you found a company like that, yes, you're providing a benefit for a lot of people. You're not just welching finances from the system. Like
I mean,
some
I
sort of rent
literally
seeker.
use Microsoft at my job every single day.
And most people do. Most people are still on Windows XP, if I'm not mistaken.
A lot
Why?
a lot of places,
Because it still works.
a
It's
lot of
reliable.
places have
You
moved
can
to
use
Windows
it.
10, but
Well, I don't know the specifics of what exact operating system they use, but most things are still Windows-based. Most banks, most insurance companies, most places still use Windows-based systems. So when you're looking at a company like Microsoft, it's done a lot of things for a lot of people. So when you say a rising tide raises all ships, in that sort of scenario, yeah, exactly.
right.
But at the same time, just because guy A over here gets a bunch of money from whatever company he founded, guy B over here doesn't necessarily benefit if his company isn't something that provides benefit to society.
Okay.
But in most cases, it is. Because
Then how about let's caveat it? A rising tide can raise all ships.
it can. And in most cases in our society, it does. Because the fact that you have a company that exists means that you're providing something to people that is worth more than the money they're willing to give to get it. Just the fact that they're willing to pay a certain amount of money, X dollars, for a thing, product or service, means they value that product or service as much as, if not more, than the money they're giving. So that's why I say when non-Western countries develop Western-like economics, their countries thrive.
Well, here's another thought perspective on a rising tide raising all ships.
Uh-huh.
So a rising tide can also sometimes be a symbol of danger approaching or other things approaching, right? And so let's use, for example, Tesla and your boy Elon Musk.
My boy.
So
I love that guy.
in comes Elon
My
Musk.
inspiration.
In comes Elon Musk with Tesla and with electric cars. And he represents this rising tide of this change that's coming, this innovation, these ideas, these groundbreaking solutions, right? And then shortly thereafter, guess what? Every automaker and his brother is spending money researching and trying to develop and trying to compete in developing this electric car market. You've been seeing it for the last 5 to 10 years. Not in the specific economic fashion of trickle-down economics. Is this an exact example? But if I were to say, do I support trickle-down economics of people, like they say, well, the wealthiest people get the biggest tax breaks when there's a tax cut. No, duh. They also pay the most taxes because
Right.
they make the most money. So when people say,
If it's the same percentage, it's still more because they have more.
right,
Basic math.
I have
But
no
I mean,
issues
in a case like
with trickle-down
Tesla-
economics. In fact, I prefer it.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe I just don't know the different applications of what is actually considered trickle-down economics, because I feel like I'm sort of actually agreeing with you. And in a case like Tesla, of course they're trying to build something when it becomes obvious that it's a great product. And that just attests to how competition creates progress. They see something that they want to make, and they try whatever way they can. Industrial espionage, someone maybe who used to work at Tesla and had some blueprints for it, whatever way they can, they're going to try to build an electric car as good as a Tesla. Because the Tesla was a long time coming. I mean, the first model, it's like Edison.
It took a while.
It's like Edison with the light bulb. This guy's an inventor, and it took a lot of iterations of the same thing to develop a good product. But now, in the place he's at, people are really paying attention to the kinds of things that Tesla is making, the projects they're doing. SpaceX, Tesla, The Boring Company, all of these things. All the brainchild of one man.
What's great about capitalism and competition is that it drives down costs too. So 50 years from now, electric cars are going to be more than likely a very just considered common option that we have.
Yeah. Because when the supply is greater, there's more of it, and it's going to be cheaper and cheaper to make, and then everyone's going to have electric cars. How exactly soon is that going to be?
I don't know about everybody having electric cars.
Well, of course not. There's still going to be some muscleheads that, they want to keep their cars. And an interesting fact you might want to know, there's people actually making laws or trying to enforce into law through legislation that you can't outlaw people from driving, which I think is kind of important because they're thinking ahead and saying, in the age of self-driving cars, they're going to be tempted to make laws, because it's in theory going to be much safer to have self-driving cars. People are going to be tempted to make laws outlawing humans driving. But I just don't think that's a good idea.
Nope.
These people don't think it's a good idea. And so they're looking at legislation now and saying, how can we prevent this from happening? And this is the kind of thing we need from all angles. People looking ahead, whether they're an inventor like Elon Musk, or they're just your average Joe that thinks, hey, my job's not going to be taken by a robot, and I'm going to make sure of it.
I mean, I just use Tesla and Elon Musk as a way to easily appeal to you.
I am a fan of the man. I'm a fan of what he's done in one lifetime. And to me, this is just an example of how much difference one person can make. So when I talk about Mensa tests for sperm banks, if we can make the average level of intelligence, just the mean, the average, much higher, then how much more progress can we experience in such a short amount of time?
It almost sounds like you're promoting eugenics.
We're talking about the median here. This isn't the outliers. When you raise the median intelligence, the outliers are going to be even more insanely intelligent. And did you hear about that gene that they isolated? It was in China because they've been doing all sorts of gene tests in China, all this CRISPR stuff.
Because they're not isolated by those, meddlesome ethics concerns that we have over here in Western civilization.
But it's interesting to watch someone who doesn't have as much ethical concerns because they start to accomplish things through human testing. So
because they're not bound down by morality, huh?
I mean, they've been making pig-human hybrids for a while in China just so they can, because
that's disturbing.
I'll get back to that, but they isolated this gene in babies. Well, not first in babies, but they isolated this gene that codes for being able to catch HIV. And so there's a certain gene that allows catching HIV. And so they thought, well, we're going to take babies and take this gene out of them. And that way they can never have HIV. And so they did it. And after they did it to, I think it was 2 babies, they realized that there's another role that this gene plays. And the role that it plays is people of unusually high intelligence usually don't have that gene. So essentially what they found out in doing this is they might have just created like super intelligent babies and figured out a way to make super smart people. Is it the only way? Is it the most ethical way? Is it something that we should all just gene edit our babies with? No. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, in this age where we can do all these tests on people, animals, hack things biologically, there's people that are taking blood of young people, putting it in these cylindrical spinners, and injecting it into older people. Why? Because they tested it on rats first, and they found that it worked to improve the health of older rats. Now they're doing it to older people who can afford it. And I think, hey, when I'm an old person, see, they should make some sort of system where when you're a young person, you can donate to the cause. And then when you're older, you can reap the benefits and get the blood of young people.
That almost sounds similar to
a vampire.
Social Security right now. Oh, when you're young,
this sounds like Social Security.
Give the government your money. Just give the government your hard-earned money, and the government will take care of it. And then when you're old, you can reap the benefits of it.
I think that's a little bit different from donating blood to a cause voluntarily, but
well, voluntarily, okay, that's the big difference right there. That's the big difference because Social
do you think
Security
they're just
gets
gonna
mandatorily taken out.
Do you think they're just going to go to people's house in the middle of the night, put a bag over their head, drag them to the laboratory, and take as much blood as they can without their heart stopping to beat? I don't think they're doing that. But, if we're talking about China, and like you said, a lower standard of ethics, who knows what they do to, what is the means that they use for their end? I don't know. But they're doing some pretty interesting things, whether they're ethical or not.
Have you heard of or read much about the natural order or the natural law, I think is what it's more commonly
Is that a
referred to
book?
as?
What is it?
It's more of a philosophy or just idea, and
The natural law.
like natural law, just the way of the universe and the way things are and they should be and whatnot, refers to not gene editing babies.
I have a few opinions on that kind of thing that I've just gathered from philosophy in general, but as to the specifics you're talking about, I don't know.
I would probably generally be opposed to the type of genetic tests that it sounds like they're doing in China.
Well, they're not doing it here, and so,
Sure, I have no jurisdiction over it. I mean, even if they were doing it here, I would have no jurisdiction over it.
If you think about it teleologically, and this is a term I learned that means the best outcome for everyone in the long run. Maybe that is actually a good thing that China is doing these things. Because
I guess,
it will mean we know more about how gene editing affects humans sooner in the future, instead of just wondering about it, only doing these tests on animals. Now, am I advocating that, we should take on the same sort of tests here in America? No. We have standards for our tests. It reminds me of those experiments they used to do that they can't do anymore. Like the experiment where they would pretend to shock people with a much higher and higher voltage. You can't even really pull off an experiment like that. An experiment that you really can't pull off today. Have you ever heard of the Stanford Prison Experiment? Now, this was an experiment.
I think so.
This was an experiment run by a psychologist who's still alive, named Dr. Zimbardo, I think was his name.
Yeah, I think I've heard of him.
And they made a movie about it, and I think most people are aware of what it is. But they took two groups of people and simulated a prison and prison guard experiment. So they had a group that was prisoners, a group that was prison guards. And very soon, things went into total chaos and pandemonium. When the guards started treating the prisoners horribly, the prisoners very soon started to have complete mental breakdowns and meltdowns and screaming and saying they wanted out. And so the professor who did this, he was shamed for having done the experiment, but there was nothing lawfully they could do against him because they signed up for the experiment, signed papers. So it was all legit. But my point is, that's the kind of experiment you can't run anymore in America. But in other places, they can do pretty much whatever they want. Depends on the country. And so what's actually the best for our progress as a race? Is it a good thing, maybe, that people are doing questionable things in some places? Maybe. I don't know.
I think a lot of it comes down to intent and then, your own principles that you hold. So, for example, I myself typically don't hold to the principle of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, to this idea of sometimes sacrificing, the individual for the collective. And I think that's very dangerous territory for people to wander into.
Well, let me ask you this question then, because this is a question that gets asked on the very subject. It's called something like the trolley question. If there was a trolley going down a track, and, this is hypothetical, so we can get ridiculous with it. If there's a trolley going down a track, the track's about to split in two. The one that it's about to go on, the left track, has 5 people tied to it. It's going to kill 5 people. Now, on the other side, there's only 1 person, the side that it's not going to go to. So if you saw this happening, this thing coming roaring down the track at hundreds of miles per hour, just a crazy trolley gone awry. Maybe there's people on board the trolley. Doesn't really matter. Would you pull the switch? Would you pull the lever that would switch the trolley over and hit the 1 person? Because it'd be less lives lost. And there's other versions of this question, like, would you shove a person onto the track to keep it from hitting more people? Most people say no, because they actually have to engage in action. But if you're just pulling a lever, a lot of times people say, well, yeah, maybe I would. Maybe I would pull a lever and have it only hit 1 person instead of 5. So I was just curious of what you thought about that.
I mean, I think a lot
obviously
of times
it's a ridiculous hypothetical scenario.
I think a lot of times in these ethical dilemma scenarios, there aren't enough practical questions asked.
What questions would you ask?
Well, I mean, so there's a lot of time, like, these scenarios are often intentionally left to be somewhat vague. And in these scenarios, you're a lot of times forced to go for the best possible outcome, right? The
lesser of 2 evils.
Right. What am I able to do that's able to what is the best possible thing that I can do?
Right. Well, that's essentially what the question is posited for.
Right. But I guess, and I think my statement about needs of the many not needing to outweigh the needs of the few, that my statement in support of saying I don't agree with that is more geared towards certain social engineerings of certain things.
So you're saying maybe globalism versus nationalism?
I mean, I'm saying that, yeah, like a lot of times it has to do with intentional decisions where that sort of principle comes into play, right?
But not everything is black and white. There's a lot of gray area.
There is a lot of gray area. But, I mean, as far as this scenario, to go back to it, so I switch this switch, and then...
And it hits 1 person instead of 5.
Well, what is this that's hitting a person?
Say, what?
So there's 2 trolleys on 2 different tracks?
No. There's 1 trolley.
Okay.
And the track's shaped like a Y.
Okay.
It's on the stick of the Y, and it's about to separate into 2.
Sure.
Right now, it's set to go left and hit 5 people, but you can throw the switch and make it turn the right way in the fork in the path and hit the 1 person instead of 5. I mean, you don't have to answer the question. It's a ridiculous hypothetical. And that's what it's there for, is to make you question, make you think, what would I do in that scenario?
Well, I mean...
Would I do anything? Should I intervene? Maybe, the 1 person is a kid and the 5 people are adults. Would that change it or not? Well, I'd say for most people it would. There's a lot of variables.
Is the 1 person unable to move? Like, are they unable to get out of the way?
That's why this isn't, a real scenario, because none of them are able to get away. Like, that's the point of it. So it's either going to hit 5 people or 1. So it's just a question that forces you to say, hey, this is what I'd do. And so you think about, well, why did I make that choice? What are the values in my mind that come into play and make themselves manifest in that scenario? because oftentimes in life we are confronted with situations where we have to choose one bad thing over another bad thing.
I mean, I suppose I'm too much of an idealist to really answer some of these questions sometimes, because I would try to save everybody. Now, that's not always possible, but I would still attempt that.
Right. And of course, anyone in their right mind would attempt to do that if they had it in their power. So I see what you're saying. But, you know, it's just one of those things, questions that people ask.
Because then that gets down into, like, you know, we start talking about the value of one human life, the value of the soul, and things like that. And I think that that's, again, hard, actually probably impossible to quantify.
You really can't, because oftentimes we don't know until a person has lived out their entire life what their effect on the rest of mankind was. So I was just saying earlier how much of an effect one person can have on society if they're smart enough or just willing enough to do a certain thing. A certain artist, a certain inventor. What can one person accomplish? So oftentimes we don't know these things until the whole thing carries itself out. So how is one person more valuable than another? I mean, no one is really more valuable than another person, but as far as their impact on society, maybe it'll be different for one person than another person. We don't really know. But, you know, we live in America where, guess what? We're all equal. We're all equal under the law.
These are great
Even if you
things
do
to
a
think
great
about.
crime, you get a right to a trial. You get a lawyer, you get a trial. Even if you did something wrong. We all have the same rights. And
that's why I love this land.
It's
And on
pretty
that
great.
note, I will bid you all adieu.
It's been fun. Stay legit. Eat red meat.
Is that your tagline now?
That is
Eat
my
red meat.
Oh, I tell everyone that.
Eat more chicken.
Eat chicken. Don't eat hot dogs. Eat chicken dogs.
That's the thing.
Anyway,
All right, y'all. Peace out.
I think we're going to call it a day, so we're done.